I just wanted to share before you listen to this episode that this conversation with Ron Rivera was recorded in December last month. This week, as many of you know, the NFL family was devastated by the news of Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin, who was hospitalized after going into cardiac arrest on the field during Monday night's game. My thoughts, prayers go out to consistently Damar Hamlin, his family, the community, his teammates, the NFL family, players, and coaches. And of course, I just continue to pray for his recovery. Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Today's guest, Ron Rivera, is the head coach of the Washington Commanders, a two-time NFL Coach of the Year whose story will inspire you, whether you're a football fan or not. Shortly after his start in Washington, Ron was diagnosed with cancer, a rare form of skin cancer. Despite undergoing rounds of chemotherapy and other treatments, Ron continued to coach, incredibly never missing a game. In January of 2021, he was declared cancer-free. Prior to the Commanders, Ron was the head coach for the Carolina Panthers from 2011 to 2019, leading the team to 3 consecutive division titles and a Super Bowl appearance. A former NFL player, he played 9 seasons with the Chicago Bears, including the 1985 Super Bowl team. In our conversation today, we talk about leading through adversity, building a culture of excellence, and rising to the occasion. This is a must-listen for leaders at every level. I took away so many leadership insights from our conversation. Here we go. This is my conversation with Washington Commanders head coach, Ron Rivera. Coach, thanks so much for joining us today inside of the season. Super grateful. Coach, how would you describe your leadership philosophy and your core values?
Well, I think that's really what it's all about is core values. For me, I guess it's by example because as a football coach, I'm fortunate enough that I played this game on the highest level. I was fortunate enough to play for the Chicago Bears from 84 to 92. I played on the Super Bowl championship team. So a lot of things that I do, I do from example. And you know what, it's interesting. I figured that out about Mike Ditka. When I played for Coach Ditka, one of the things that was really impressive to me was how, he always had this knack for getting on us, pushing us, and trying to get us through certain things. And I can remember one day, I asked Coach, I said to him, I said, hey, Coach, can I ask you a question? I said, what was today all about? I mean, you were getting on us pretty hard, pushing us. I said, what gives? He looked at me and said, Ronnie, I would never have you guys do anything that I couldn't do. And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
What made me realize, Molly, just how important that statement was to me was he was a Hall of Famer as a player.
Right.
So that meant he had a tremendous standard. So one of the things that I've always tried to do is set whatever our standard is. That's what I try to set with the players so they all understand that this is what is expected of you. And that's what Coach Ditka did. And that's why he pushed us the way he did. So I've always tried to lead by example, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Who or what do you think has been your biggest influence in shaping your views? I mean, you referenced Ditka, but I've heard you talk about others.
Yeah, I have, and first and foremost, I always talk about my parents. My dad was a career Army officer. He did 32 years in the United States military. He did 2 tours in Vietnam, and he spent time in Korea and South America, Central America. And, when I got the head coaching job of the Carolina Panthers, one of the first things my dad said to me, he looked at me and said, Ronnie, I'm going to give you this little piece of advice and don't ever forget it. He said, as the leader, when all hell is breaking loose, when things are going bad or going good, everybody's going to turn to you and look for you. Okay, look at you and see what you're doing and how you're handling yourself. If you're handling yourself and you're in control, your team will be in control. If you're out of control, your team will be out of control. So I've always tried to be, in control, be stoic at times, know when to celebrate, know when not to. So, I would have to say my parents. But then, I've been very fortunate. I had a high school coach named Carl Stevenson, who was a tremendous leader then. My college coaches, Roger Theater, who was really all about taking care of the players, and so I've learned some of that stuff. Joe Cap, who was really about just the loyalty. And then as I got into the NFL, playing for Coach Dicka he made a huge impact. And then the coaches that I worked for, I worked for Dave Wanstead, who really was one of the really good people in this league. Andy Reid, who I learned a tremendous amount of stuff, really about organization and how to be on top of things. Then I worked for Lovie Smith, and the biggest thing I learned from Coach Smith is about the detail, how the finite details are so important. And then with Norv Turner and learning from him really about, when to take chances, when to do certain things a certain way. So those guys had a lot of big impacts in terms of things that I've taken and used as a coach. I've had several mentors that have been really tremendous people. John Madden was tremendous. He really did. He helped me out so much and got me over the hump, and I'm forever grateful for Coach. And then, I've had several others that have been there for me. Joe Gibbs is helping me tremendously. I've talked with Coach Torres from the Yankees. God, I'm trying to remember all the guys that I talked to. And it's amazing how when you reach out to these guys and they help and they're willing to share and give you ideas. So, I've tried to do that. I love to read. I've read an awful lot about Winston Churchill and his leadership style. I read about all the military leaders in World War II. And then even going all the way back to the birth of this country, I've read Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, guys like that. So there's been a lot. It's really kind of interesting because, there's so many great leaders that are out there that try to set great examples for us. And Eleanor Roosevelt was probably one of my favorites when I read Franklin Delano Roosevelt's book, No Ordinary Time. And in it, she talks about how you control everything. The only way you can let somebody influence you is if you let them. So don't let anybody tell you no that doesn't want to tell you yes. I mean, that stuff to me is powerful stuff.
Yeah, control the controllables. I've heard you talk about that. I love it. Be where your feet are. But what's so cool about what you're saying, Coach, is that, and I hear that consistently, and we know this, that leaders lean into other great leaders and they ask a lot of questions and they really listen. And then they take all that in to become the best version of themselves as a leader. So it's neat to hear you rattle all those incredible names off, which is a lot of incredible names. Well, let me ask, how has your leadership approach, your style, how has it evolved throughout your career?
Well, when I first got started, I was trying to do everything, and one of the things that I learned very quickly was to delegate. And in my first 2 seasons as a head coach, the mistake I had made was I didn't set the standard. And that's one of the things that I got from Coach Madden. Because he told me, he said, Ron, the thing you got to remember now is you can pass it off to your assistant coaches, but you got to circle around and make sure you told them what you expect. If you didn't tell them that I need it done at this level or this is how I want it done, they're going to do it to the best of their ability. And if it's not up to your standard, that's your fault. And I said, wow. But then that made sense because when I had talked to Coach Reid one time, and I asked Andy, I said, Coach, I said, when we were together and I was on your staff, you only let one coach go. I said, what was it that you kept us all? He said, look, Ron, one of the things that I did was I told everybody what I wanted done. If I didn't like it, I would tell them how to correct it and do it the way I wanted. He said, and then if you hadn't corrected yourself, if you hadn't learned and grown, then I had to make a move. And it was an amazing thing. So taking what I learned from Coach Madden and listening to what Coach Reid said, then I began to realize that that's one of the things I needed to do with my coaches was set the standard and then coach the coaches. Not all of them. I mean, I have some very veteran coaches on my staff that don't need me telling them how to do things, but they just need to know what I expect of them. And that's probably the most important thing that I've done.
And you've walked into a ton of locker rooms where you've had to turn things around big time and do it quickly. What advice do you have for leaders who are trying to change their culture wherever they are?
One of the things that I always start with when I talk to people about this is, people dream about things and people have a vision about things. And you have to make sure you know the difference. The dream is the fantasy, what you hope for. The vision is what you see, what you believe in, that you have a plan to accomplish. And make sure everybody understands what your vision is, and then understand what your plan is to make that vision come true and what the ultimate goal is. So when I got into Carolina, that was one of the things I talked about. One of the things I learned in having talked to the previous owner there, Jerry Richardson, was that you had to have a set of core values that you have to ask everybody to live by. And so one of the things that he and I talked about was what were the core values. And it's turned out to be hard work, harmony, teamwork, listen, and respect. And there was a reason for all 5 words. But the one that really got me really intrigued more than anything else was when I been talking was listen. And I said, listen. He said, yes. He said, Ron, I would use the word communicate, but the difference being this. People think sometimes communicating is just talking when it could be listening. So that's one of the things I've taken from him as far as that was concerned. And so when we would bring players in or coaches in, we'd tell them, hey, look, these are our core values: hard work, harmony, teamwork, listen, and respect. If you can live your life accordingly, if you can work accordingly to those core values, you can fit us. And so we try to make sure the guys, the people that work for us understand, what those core values are and how they fit us.
We've talked about curiosity. We've talked about asking great questions and then really listening. What is your approach to asking great questions relevant to talking through potentially a player's, not gotten it done on the field. And so you maybe ask them, what is your philosophy and approach to that? Because it feels like there's a bit of a methodology, Ron, around your approach there.
I never try to denigrate anybody in front of anybody. I try to, if I have a guy just not playing well, I bring him in and I'll talk to him privately, and then try to find ways to build him up. But when I'm sitting there talking, some of the things I'm trying to find is what's holding him back. What is that mental wall that he can't get past? And as you talk to guys, you find out and you learn and you understand some things. I had a player when I was with the Philadelphia Eagles, a terrific linebacker, one of the best I've coached, and he was tremendous. But he was kind of having a little bit of, he wasn't really himself one week. And so I got to talking to him and found out that, he was having some issues. And so, we were able to find out those issues, let me know what they were, and then work through them. And he was back to himself. But it sometimes, getting to know the players on a personal level and then watching them and seeing how they handle themselves off the field as well as on the field, I think gives you an opportunity to really get a good feel and understanding. And then that'll lead towards the questions that I think you have to be able to ask to get the answers you're looking for. Because I think if you don't know your players, if you don't know the people you're working with or working for, it's hard to ask good questions.
Yep, no question. And I've heard you talk about authenticity as a leader, which is a powerful way to drive that connection for sure. We talked about controlling the controllables, and at some level, with any team, there's a lot of outside noise at some level, and you've had to deal with this a bit this season. What advice do you give leaders on helping their teams focus amidst a ton of distractions?
I had met and talked with a sports psychologist, Dr. Kevin Elko, and when we were ranking our Super Bowl run in 2015, and I noticed our guys were getting a little distracted. Well, he and I reached out to him when we were talking, and I said, look, I'm having a little trouble. Our guys are getting a little distracted. I mean, at the time we were undefeated, we were 10-0, and everybody's patting them on the back and stuff, and guys were doing all these different things. Well, he said to me, he said, Ron, that's good, but what you got to make sure they do is that they are where their feet are. Just tell them, be where your feet are. Wherever you are, focus in at that moment and be there. If you're on the practice field, practice. If you're on the game field, play. If you're at home with the family, be with the family. If you're at a function, be at that function. That way they know that being focused at that moment is the most important thing that they have to do. So that's kind of one of the things that, that I still stress it, still talk to it about our guys. One of the things we talk about also is, is control what you can, but also understand this. Make the important things important and the interesting things, leave them alone. And so what we've gotten to is when anything happens that doesn't involve football, I tell the guys, I said, that's interesting. I'll handle that. You guys focus in on what's important. And they've been great. They really have. And they've responded. the way they answer to the media, the way, they're very simple, very concise answers. They move on to back to being on the football field.
Is there anything tactically you do to help them control the controllables, right? Because they're with you a lot, but they're not with you all the time. And they've got these little phones that can be quite a distraction. Is there anything tactically that you do with them to help them be where their feet are?
The big thing is we try to address, if anything comes up, I'll address it very quickly. And again, just so that they understand and may tell them, hey, look, if somebody wants to ask you a specific question like that, and honestly, the best thing you could do is say, hey, you know what? That's a question for coach, and my media relations guy here is terrific. And he's been really good at helping me with a lot of things that go on. We always do a sort of a debriefing prior to any of my press conferences. Well, it's kind of the same thing for the players. As long as, if you give them direction, you let them know, hey, it's okay to tell them, hey, that's something for coach, or, that's something I don't know about, or I wasn't here when that happened. Just giving them a chance, an opportunity to have something, in their pocket they could pull out and use as a way to get away from having to answer those questions, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, I had a friend once show me, I think it was our mutual friend, John Gordon, you draw two circles. In the inner one, you write all the things you can control, which is an enormous amount of things: attitude, mindset, effort, discipline, and on the outside, you write all the things that you can't. And boy, it's exhausting when you try to control the things you can't, right? You got to focus on, talk about an energy drainer.
Oh, absolutely. It's like when we're playing a game, I tell the guys, look, there are certain things you can't control, but you can impact them, but you can't control them.
Big difference.
So those things you impact, make sure you make the biggest impact you can.
Adversity, setbacks, challenges, all that live inside of sports and certainly inside of football. How do you coach your team to stick to the vision when it gets tough?
I think the biggest thing is you have to talk about the vision. You have to constantly remind them. I have 3 things that I always talk about, and they're in every one of my PowerPoints with the players. They're typically the second slide. And basically it says, this is what we control: our attitude, our preparation, and our effort. Okay? Your attitude is going to dictate to you how you're going to handle the situation. If you walk in with the right attitude, man, getting through that situation is easy. If you walk in with the wrong attitude, it's going to be tough. Your preparation, we as coaches are here to facilitate your learning, but whether you take the learning is going to be up to you. And then if you give the right kind of effort, championship effort gives you a chance to win. A sloppy effort gives you no chance. So I talk about that every day. And I think that is one of the things that the guys have really bought into. They understand it. When I was going through my chemo treatments in 2020, I had several of my former players text me the message, Coach, you control it. You control your attitude, Coach. And it meant a lot, Molly. It really did. When guys that you worked with, played with, you coach, they remember those lessons. That was really cool. It was a cool thing for me.
Hi there, it's Molly. I've got some exciting news to share. I'm thrilled to announce I've launched my first ever on-demand course, Up Your Game. Unlock the drive to fuel next level success. Have the past few years left you burned out and stretched thin? Like, despite your success, you're capable of more. Maybe you've lost your purpose and that inner fire to pursue your dreams. If so, you are not alone. So many of us have been there. As a top sports agent for 15 years, representing and working with the best of the best, I've seen and helped countless people unlock their drive to accomplish great things and finally live out their dreams. That's why I've crafted a brand new on-demand course to help you unlock your potential to fuel next level success. In my new course, Up Your Game, I share the critical 8 keys that you absolutely must use to get unstuck and to finally realize your fullest potential. This course, it's not inspirational fluff. It gives you action guides so that you can apply it to your life and take action right now. So are you ready to up your game? Sign up for my new course today at mollyfletcher.com/course. That's mollyfletcher.com/course. I can't wait for this course to change your life in incredible ways. Check it out. What's your approach to communicating tough decisions, tough calls, if you will, to the people that you lead?
I think the biggest thing is just being upfront, being honest. I mean, one of the other nice little lessons I learned very quickly from Coach Madden was you got to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. If you tell them what they want to hear, you're going to have to come back at some point and tell them what they need to hear. He also told me that was something that I needed to have in my back pocket so that when I interviewed people, if I was interviewing a guy that was going to potentially be a coach, I needed to find out if he was going to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And to make sure I have one of those guys on my staff. The biggest mistake I made as a head coach my first year was I didn't have a former head coach on my staff. Somebody that could come to me and say, hey, coach, that's wrong. Coach, think about this, or, great job. I didn't have that. And so now when I have young coaches who come to me and they talk about formulating a staff, I always tell them, hey, I would make sure I have somebody on my staff that's going to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And I need to have somebody on my staff that's been there and done it. The little saying that I like to tell people when they start telling me what to do, that I said, hey, don't draw me a map unless you've been there. And because so many people haven't done what we've done.
Sure.
Yeah, Molly, people haven't done what you've done. I mean, being a sports agent, somebody telling you, hey, you maybe can get this. Well, have you been there? Do you know what those negotiations are like? So I've learned a lot, and I try to use those things when I learn when I have to deal with folks.
Have you ever had a B player, if on your staff, or a B player athlete, if you will, right? Who you believe has the talent, but maybe they don't have the drive, right? They're gifted as heck. We've both seen this a ton, right? But they're not disciplined as it relates to the drive to perform better. What is your strategy to try to unlock that drive inside of them so that they can unlock the talent and be the best version of themselves?
You take it away from them, the opportunity, and they're going to do one of two things, Molly. They're either going to work to get back or they're not at all. And if they don't work at all, then they just told you it's time to move on. And we've done that a couple of times, and we've gotten it. I mean, it's been amazing to watch. But some guys they don't get the message, and next thing you know, they're out of the league. And the crazy part is, they may have been a high draft pick. They may have been a third rounder or something like that. And you let them go, and they may get picked up for a week and then cut again. And you sit there and go, that's what I'm trying to tell the young man. What's to me, though, is what's more gratifying is if you have a young man that doesn't quite have the talent, but he has the drive.
Oh, yeah.
But what's neat about now, Molly, is because with the way things are set, we have a practice squad, and we can put a player on the practice squad. And we did this. My first year in 2020, we came in, we had a young man, Jeremy Reeves, tremendous young man, and he just barely missed making the 53 squad. So we put him on practice squad, but I told him, I said, Jeremy, you were so close. I'm just telling you, you had a great camp. You deserve the opportunity. So we're going to put you on practice squad, but I promise you, when the opportunity comes to elevate you, I will. Well, lo and behold, in the middle of the year, we got one of our starters gets hurt. And a lot of people thought I was going to bring one of my former players in. But because I had told Jeremy that he deserved the opportunity, I gave it to him, and he repaid me by playing the way he needed to play for our team, helped us get into the playoffs. And he's been on the 53 ever since. And then that to me is, those are the guys you want to expend your energy on. Those are the guys the guys that have the talent, that don't understand it, they're hard. And they take a lot of your time. They're what we call energy
vampires. Yeah.
Yes. Those are the guys that we look to get past. But young men, that we have like a Jeremy Reeves, those are the guys we're looking for.
Well, and I think there's a laundry list. I mean, you think about it, Brady's story is insane. 6th round draft pick, 199th overall pick. I mean, he isn't supposed to be this good. That at some level has been, no question, a tremendous amount of drive.
That's the key. If you find those guys, and they're typically guys, that are later in the draft, but then they show up, they have that little something that tells you, we got to keep an eye on this young.
And you detect that through their behavior more than anything, right, Coach, versus anything they ever would say.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because when you watch the way they are, they're the guys that are trying to get into the drill to do extra reps. Like if you line 10 guys up during practice, during a drill period, they may get 2 or 3 reps. But a guy that wants to, that's trying to show you that he can do it, he's going to get back in that line again. He's going to cut in front of somebody else. He's going to take 5 or 6 reps, not 2 or 3. Those are the guys that you notice, because that's one of the things that when I'm watching practice tape, the first thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for that guy that seems to always get in front, always in front. And every now and then you'll see a guy that seems to back up to the back. And you sit there, and those are the guys that we talked about earlier. That no, that's not what you're supposed to push yourself to do more. Show us more. That's what you want to do. If you show us what you're capable of, that gives you more opportunities.
How do you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to? How do you decide how much one-on-one time to give people, how much group time to give? Get me inside of your time, energy philosophy, because you've performed at a high level for a really long time, and that requires a tremendous amount of discipline around time and energy, I would imagine.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I did when we were in Carolina that really helped us was I figured out time management first and foremost. That was one of my big mistakes too. Was like you're asking. My first 2 years, I gave my time to everybody, and so what happened was, I kept getting caught up with things, and so when I got into my third year, one of the first things I noticed was that how much time the players were wasting. And so I set up this time management program for them. I moved everything around. The very first thing we do is we're going to meet as a team. The next thing we'll do is we'll break up into our individual areas. Now we'll go special teams, then after go offense. But during special teams, if you weren't part of that, what I wanted was I wanted you guys over here, just doing these things. I didn't want you guys doing those things. If I caught you doing these things, we'd have an issue. We'd straighten that out. And then all of a sudden, they started realizing that they had to manage their time. Well, light bulb goes off for me because I would go from there and then I would end up doing something else that was taking time from what I needed. So I tried to find areas and opportunities and say, hey, look, this is some downtime for me. This is an opportunity here to do a little something else, do something over here, or schedule it later in the day when things didn't matter as much. What's interesting is like, this is a good week. And why I'm able to do something like this more is because last week we had our bye. And a lot of things that we've done, we've already prepared. They're already in place. That's a big part of it. Other part is knowing who to delegate and how to delegate the authority. One of the things that I learned from Andy Reid, again, another great lesson was I had an issue happen my first year when I was on the staff. And it was my first positional coaching job I'd ever had. So I had something happen. I went up to coach to tell him. I said, hey, look, this is happening. This is this and this and this. And coach looked at me and said, Ron, I appreciate you coming to me with something like that. But this is how you learn to do things. I want you to make a decision on how you want to handle that. Then come back and tell me how you handled it. We'll watch it, see what happens. And afterwards, we'll talk about the results. That way we'll know whether you made a good decision or you could have made a different decision. He never said bad or wrong. He said, or you could have made a different decision or a better decision. But he never told you, oh, that was wrong, that was bad. He just told you, hey, you can do better. And so I learned very quickly that that's how I learned. So that's what I do with my young coaches. Tell them, hey, if something's going on, go out and take care of it. Then tell me what you did. Then what happens. Let's see what the results are.
Well, it's cool what you're saying because you're giving them the freedom to fail at some level, but then come back for feedback and support. And it's interesting because I think we have a really low failure tolerance in the world today with our children, with everybody. And we have to encourage people because if we're not failing, we're not pushing ourselves, right?
Yep, we're not learning. We're not growing.
Right. No question. How do you grow and evolve as a leader? You've been in the game a long time.
I think the biggest thing that's helped me more than anything else, other than what those results are, but it has been feedback. I've got some very veteran coaches on my staff now, and a lot of times, after things have gone on, something has happened, I'll go ask them specific questions. I say, hey, what do you think about what we did here? What can we do better here? I've listened a lot more to the players lately, a lot because of what you just talked about, Molly, is that, in today's world, with these young people coming up with, them wanting instant gratification, having to deal with and handle them a certain way is important. But one of the things I try to do is I have an idea of how I might want to do something. And so what I'll do is I'll present it to them as if, hey, you know what? You guys have done some really good things. I love the way you're handling this stuff. What if we did this? Would this make it better? And by doing those things, by doing it that way, I think has also helped me to evolve and understand the player's mindset and then try to work with it. And that's the other thing. Again, going back to Coach Madden, one of the things he told me is he said, you've got to have guys in the locker room that can express themselves to you so that you get a feel and understanding of who these young people are. He says, if you don't understand these young people, you're going to have some issues. You're going to have some problems because you're going to want to do something that is completely foreign to them. You want to make sure you understand them and can deal with them. One of the things that helped me was in 2014 season. There was an issue that had happened with another team in the league. And so I got called to the league offices, myself and a couple other coaches, and they wanted to have an open discussion about this. And so there was myself, a group from the NFL Players Association, a group from the NFL Competition Committee, and 3 coaches that were invited there. So we sat in and we listened to both sides talk about things. And one of the players made a comment basically saying, well, you know, it's the locker room. You know, that's our space. What goes on down, that's up for us. Well, that's where part of the problem had occurred. And it made me realize at that instance that, you know what, wait a minute. I got a vested interest in what goes on in that locker room. Okay. And so I need to be around and make myself more available. So what I did was I used to have an office on the 2nd floor. Well, I moved my office down to the 1st floor, right next to the door, right next to the cafeteria, right next to the meeting rooms. So now players could come in easily and talk to me. Because one of the things I asked the guys about was they would tell me, you know, going up to the 2nd floor, you got to walk by the receptionist, we go by the general manager's office, you know. So I get it. So I moved it downstairs. And then what I did was I started to walk the locker room. And so one day, one of my meetings, I said, anybody got any questions? One of the guys said, yeah, why do you come into the locker room so much? And I said, guys, that's not your locker room. That's not my locker room. That's our locker room. What happens in that locker room, we all have a vested interest in. And I'm just trying to make sure it's the right kind of place. It got to the point where guys were so comfortable that guys would come into my office and they'd have the TV on watching Sports Center. You know, of course, it would be a chance for someone to get away. I got so comfortable, I'd go into the locker room and I would sit in guys' lockers and you know, and I had one guy, he used to kill me, coach, killing my rep, man. They see you in my locker. I said, hey, I'm just starting to hang around with you guys. He said, well, coach, you sit next door. I said, all right. So,
That's awesome.
But it created that relationship, you know, that I talked about earlier, Molly, is that you got to get to know these guys. And the other thing, too, that if you show them that you care about them beyond football, man, they open up even more.
Speaking of your guys, right? I mean, you got some egos at some level that you deal with and have dealt with. How do you get some of these big egos to buy in?
Well, one of the things I try to do first is I try to find the guys that make the most impact in the locker room. And when you find those guys and you can develop trust and explain to them and get them to see it, they help you spread it. There's no way I could do this all by myself. But we have a couple of young men in here that are tremendous leaders. And, you know, and there was a span of a couple of weeks where I had both of those 2 leaders each talk individually at different times. When we upset Philadelphia in Philadelphia, my mother had just passed away. And I was getting up there to talk to the players, and I just couldn't because all I could think of was my mom and how proud she would have been that we just upset the Eagles. And so Terry McLaurin stepped in and spoke. And it was a tremendous speech. It really was. And but there's no way I could. Then a couple weeks later, we play a team that we dominated, but we didn't beat them the way we should have. And my other leader gets up there, Jonathan Allen, and said, hey, you know what? I could have played better, but I'm telling you what, we all could have played better. We could have finished that game better. We have to understand that we can do better. And so the message has gotten out. When guys like that step out and talk, that really helps get the message across.
Absolutely. I love it. You know, cancer has impacted you. It's impacted your family deeply, particularly obviously in 2022, you faced your own diagnosis. How did your fight change you? change your perspective on life?
It really impacted me to the point where, the little things really do matter now for me personally. Time matters to me personally. I lost my brother in 2015. And, that was one of those things where they say, you don't know cancer till it hits somebody around you. And then I learned you don't know cancer till it hits you. And that's one of the things. I do find myself a little more selfish with myself now, Molly. I don't do as many things as I used to. And that's because my time to me personally is a little more valuable. I think one of the things that it has shown me too is how to rely on people, how much more I need the right kind of people around me, because the people that were here, a lot of them took on extra duties while I was going through cancer during the season. And as I was going through the treatments, it really does focus you in on yourself, taking care of you. But when other people step up and they take a little bit off your plate, that really gave me a chance to compartmentalize so that when I was with the players, I was where my feet were. When we were in meetings or we were on the practice field or we were in the locker room, it really helped me they really helped me to get through this. So just finding out just how much more I depended on people too.
Hi again, it's Molly. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you're a go-getter who wants to conquer overwhelm and sharpen your focus, I want to let you know about my new free webinar training, Purposeful Productivity. This free webinar gives you a framework to unlock more energy for what matters most and to finally beat burnout. Head over to mollyfletcher.com/webinar to access this free training and my new life-changing energy management framework. That's mollyfletcher.com/webinar. Head over to mollyfletcher.com/webinar to access this free training and my new life-changing energy management framework. That's mollyfletcher.com/webinar. Despite the chemo, this is incredible, and the other treatments that you had, you never missed a game. I mean, get me inside of how you did that, your strength inside of that, the discipline, the focus to do that.
When I was getting prepared to go through it all, our team doctor, my oncologist, my radiologist, and our head trainer, all four of them told me the same thing. That was, you have to manage this and you have to focus in on you getting healthy. And so what I did was, I had a routine, and that routine I stuck to. My wife and I, we didn't Google anything. Okay. We didn't know nothing about the treatments we were doing. Nothing. In fact, I didn't know anything about the chemo medicine I was taking. I took it's called a platinum, cisplatin. That's the name of it, cisplatin. And apparently it's a very powerful chemo, which I didn't understand that either. I had no idea. After I finished my treatments, I was reading a book by this woman who I think she's a terrific person, Liza Marshall. And she was a double breast cancer patient. And she had the worst kind of breast cancer you could. And she wrote this book, and she had asked me if I wouldn't mind reading it and putting something on the cover for her. And I did, and it was an amazing book. She entitled it, she's a really terrific person. It was entitled Something Off My Chest. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was about going through what she went through. But in the book, she describes cisplatin. And I'm sitting there reading, I didn't realize how powerful it was and realize that it's considered a platinum, which is a big time drug. And so I went through and learned for the first time. So not knowing, what to quote unquote go through, I just experienced what I experienced from people that went through it. I talked to other cancer patients that had gone through the same exact cancer I had, and I listened to them. I reached out to them and I talked to them. I went to people who could draw me a map. And that's what really helped me get through it, Molly, was I understood what what I was really going to feel, what to expect, and how to handle it. That was one of the things. My support system, my wife, my son, my daughter were tremendous. For the most part, during the work week, either my wife drove me to treatments and to practice, or my daughter took me to treatments or to practice, and one of the two of them picked me up and took me home. I was fortunate. My daughter works for us. She's in our social media department, and so our hours, really work together. And every coach, I gave a little something extra to, some extra duties, and they were able to help because they took that off my plate. I was able to make it. I would come after, we set it up at the hospital. I was one of the first patients every morning. I got my treatments. Then my daughter or wife would bring me to to the facility. Our chef here had my breakfast ready to go. I would eat breakfast, go into meetings, come out of meetings, take a 30-minute nap, and then they had some sort of soup ready for me. I would eat soup, go to practice, finish practice, I'd come out, and then I would do my media. I would do my post-practice meetings. I would do my film study, and then my wife or daughter would come get me roughly between 5:30 and 6:30, and that would be it. We'd go home. I would eat. I would have to stay upright because, it was throat cancer and my esophagus was affected. So I had to make sure the food would digest. So I would have to stay up an hour after I'd eat. So somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30, 8 o'clock, my wife and I would walk outside with the dogs. And it didn't matter what the weather was like. I had to make sure. So we would do that. So I had this routine that I stuck to. And like I said, the less I knew about what the quote unquote effects were going to be, the better off I was, because I had a regimen. I listened to the doctors and I listened to people that had gone through what I went through.
Well, you obviously had some incredible people around you supporting you through that, and your wife, I know, is a total stud. So no surprise. What would you say is the hardest thing about being an NFL coach?
Everything comes back to you. Everything comes back. It really does. I learned that my first year. We were running low on Gatorade. Well, they came to me and told me we're running low on Gatorade. Something happened with the bus. Well, they came and told me something happened with it. It just, no matter what it is, it comes back to you. And you have to deal with it. And so that's probably the biggest thing, is that it always comes back to you, and you have to be ready to handle it. It will take away from whatever you're doing. You have to refocus, reset, and then go again.
What's the most rewarding?
Oh, just watching a player flourish, watching a player grow, watching a player succeed. That's probably one of the most rewarding things. It's just see, I'm not in this for me anymore. I'm in it for the team, for the organization that we represent, because I want to win for them. I want our players to experience what the euphoria that I went through as a player in 1985. There's some really high highs, and then there's some real low lows. I've won a Super Bowl. I've lost Super Bowls, but there's no feeling like it. And so I want to win for these people. I really do. I want them to be able to experience it.
You've played on, and you just mentioned this, coached Super Bowl caliber teams, right? What separates great teams in your mind from good teams?
Great teams are really, truly about the team at that moment in time. That's why there's very few repeats, because something now happens that takes these guys out of that realm. In 1985, when we won, when the Bears won, that next year we were better statistically, but we weren't a better team. Statistically, we were better. And so, it's a little something I've learned that basically says, the best team doesn't win. The team that's the best team that day wins. So that to me is one of the things that I'm preaching to our guys, just so they understand that, hey, we might be better than whoever we're playing, but if we don't play better than them, we'll lose.
All right, we end with rapid fire, so I'm going to hit you with some good ones. You've got a busy day today, so I'm going to hit you with some quick ones, and then you just tell me what comes up. Sound good?
Okay, sure.
Boil your success down to 3 words.
Attitude, preparation, and effort.
Do you have a morning or evening routine that you lean into? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, my morning routine, more so than anything else, is when I get in. I have a bunch of notes that I make at, the night before. I read through those notes, and they're things to remind me. I think that's probably one of the more important things is that, I got to look at those things. And then I always look at the PowerPoint and try to make sure that the message that I'm trying to get across to everybody is the right message.
What do you think people would be surprised to learn about you?
I don't like scary movies.
Well, then just don't watch them, man. That's easy.
I know.
That's funny. I don't either, man. I actually don't really like movies at all, right? You don't have time for that, probably.
No, it's funny. I really don't. As much as I used to love movies. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to work at a movie theater. But
So in the last 5 years, is there a new belief, behavior, or a new habit maybe that has most improved your life?
I really do think, more than anything else, the lessons I learned from having gone through cancer about time and how important it is, and how much that means. So trying not to, and I don't want to say waste, but trying not to focus on the wrong things. I think, the interesting things, I think that's one of the things that I've learned is let's stick to what's important.
So the show's called Game Changer. So one last question. Who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
I have to go back to my father more than anything else. After my mother passed and we went back for the funeral and we had this reception and there were all these pictures. And as I looked at the pictures, it was almost like a timeline of our family. And just looking at what my dad went through and how my dad got to where we are, and and also my mother as well, because when I look at what mom did, I mean, there was times when my dad was gone. She was mother, father, coach. Mom pitched batting practice for us. We would sit there and, dad was gone and dad used to do all the baseball stuff. So dad was in Vietnam. We were playing Little League baseball. I didn't play well. So when we got home, we went out in the back and mom pitched batting practice to me. She did that to all of us, tackling drills, but she knew football. My dad being from Puerto Rico was a baseball guy. Okay. Mom grew up with football. So when we did tackling drills, we did them at home. Mom set it up. And we tackled each other. I mean, when you got 4 boys, you got part of a team.
That is awesome. Did she take a couple of you guys down once in a while too?
Oh yeah, mom was showing. Hey, mom was. I tell people this. Mom was. She was a very strong woman, very very strong, but very loving. And mom would learn something about something. She would read about it. She would study it. She'd go out and do it. She made her own clothes for the longest time, so she would have extra money to buy us clothes. And she got herself one of those Singer sewing machines. She learned how to sew, so she made herself her own clothes. I mean, that was her approach on things. Was that if I was going to do something, she was going to do it right. She was going to learn everything she could about it.
Is there a moment? I've heard you tell the story with your dad when there was a father in the stands, a major, getting after a son, and what your dad did. I think that is, particularly in the world we live in today, Ron, a really powerful story. Is there I'd love for you to share that, but also a story like that maybe of your mom that made such an impact on you. I know you were 12 and your dad did that at the ball field.
I was playing Little League baseball. We were playing this game. We had this other kid on the team. He was a pretty good player. He was a pitcher, and sometimes, when he pitched, his dad would be at the game, and the kid would get really nervous. And then, so the kid comes up to bat, and, he took a swing at a ball, missed it, and it was strike one. And all of a sudden you hear, "Hit the ball, knucklehead. Come on now, hit the ball." So then another pitch, and, he'd foul it off. He says, you got to get on top of the ball, hit the ball. So after the kid's at bat, and the kid was really crushed. He went into the dugout. And my dad looked at him. So my dad takes off his coaching shirt, that said the Pirates, and he puts on his uniform, puts his hat on the cover for my dad. He walks out of the dugout, goes all the way up, and he goes to this major. He salutes him. And at the time, I didn't know what he said, but what he had said to him was, "Sir, with all due respect, let me coach your son, please." And he looked at my dad. He saluted my dad. He sat back and didn't say a word the rest of the game. And so afterwards, he came up and said something to my father. And my father, and so he was talking to my mom. And he said, "Well, the major took it pretty well," because that's something my dad could have gotten in trouble for, because he he was a superior offer to my father. He outranked him. But my dad just felt that was important. And I always thought, man, that really spoke volumes as to the character of who my dad was. With my mom, there's just so many things, because she was always there. My mom saw every game I played in college but two, and they were the two hardest ones to get to. And one was Georgia, and the other one was West Point. She didn't make those games. But I can remember when I was in the seventh grade, we were stationed in Fort Gully, Panama, and high school started from seventh grade to 12th grade. And so we had this team that played seventh, eighth, and ninth graders played together. And so I was a seventh grader and I was a quarterback, and we lost the game, and I was crushed. And so I was sitting on the bench and I was crying. My mom came up to me. She looked at me and said, "Did you try?" I said, "Oh, Mom, I tried. I wish I could have done more." She said, "Ronnie, take a deep breath. Remember who you are." And that's all she said to me. And I always thought, okay. And I think about that a lot. When things don't go right, I take a deep breath and I remember who I am.
Coach, thank you for taking time in the middle of a season, and I'll be cheering for you against the Giants this weekend.
Well, I appreciate it, Molly. Thank you very much.
Here are a few of my favorite takeaways from an awesome conversation with Coach Ron Rivera. Number one, vision is leadership, meaning talk about the vision, live it. And when people are off course, dial it back in with the vision. Number two, be close to the people you lead. I loved how he talked about moving his office to be close to the locker room, close to the guys. He made it easier to connect, to get in and out, for guys to hang with him, for him to connect with the people that he led. Love it. Number three, the value of time. Cancer dialed that in for him big time. He has a new perspective and value on time and its limit. As leaders, we get pulled. We have to get really clear. Be really clear on who and what you give your time and energy to. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. This episode was edited and sound designed by the team at Sound On Studios. You can find out more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. Check it out. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.